Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's September 20, 2019, and this is episode 677. Over the last few months, I've made a number of changes to my WordPress portfolios and the plugins used to serve up images in posts. I've been asked about what I use a number of times, and because I reported on my use of the Next Gen Gallery plugin 2 years ago in episode 583, I figured it is also important to let you know that I'm no longer using it. We'll get into why I've moved on from Next Gen later, as I don't want to start the podcast with a somewhat negative section, and chronologically, all of this started in a positive note anyway, so let's start with that. My recent changes came about a few months ago when I looked for an alternative to including my shooting information on the blog and verbally in the podcasts. I was requested to do this many years ago, and I have continued to do so, but it wasn't ideal. And so I searched for a WordPress plugin that would enable me to show this information in the lightbox, which is the larger view of the image when you click on them in posts. I quickly found what I still believe to be the best solution for this, which is the Meow Lightbox from Meow Apps. You will have hopefully noticed that when you click on images in posts now, you see a nice line of EXIF data showing the shooting information for the image in the lightbox. The lightbox also intelligently places portrait images over on the left side of the screen and displays the shooting information and caption to the right so that we can view portrait orientation images as large as possible. We'll open the lightbox and click through a few images shortly so that you can see this in action. There are a couple of things about the settings for the Meow Lightbox that I'd like to touch on. The first one may well be related to my theme, but I had to add a WP block image class to the selector field in the advanced settings, as you can see in the screenshot that I've embedded in the blog at this point. If you're viewing on a device that can't see the images in the chapters, please go to the blog at mbp.ac/677 to view these images. Basically though, without the class that I added, the images are not linked to anything. I also had to use a tool to run a regular expression search and replace on all posts in my blog up until I started using the Gutenberg editor in WordPress, and added a class to all of my images called MBP Photo. With that also in the Meow Lightbox select field, all images since I started blogging in 2005 are now picked up and displayed correctly. Finally, I added No Show to the Anti-Selector field, and this enables me to add that class to the additional CSS class field in the advanced section for images in the WordPress Gutenberg editor, and then they will not be displayed in the Meow Lightbox. This is useful, for example, for things like graphics for my tours, which I sometimes embed in posts. These need to link to my tour pages, but without the anti-selector, they will open in the lightbox like all other images, even if I specifically link them to my tour pages. With these few additional settings, the Meow Lightbox works exactly as I'd like it to, with the exception of one feature, and that is a slideshow button. I would really like to have a play button that cycles through images in a simple slideshow. Nothing fancy, just a fade between each image. I've contacted the developer twice about this, and he is ignoring my email. He was pretty responsive over an issue I had with his plugin that we're going to look at next, but on the prospect of adding a slideshow to the lightbox, he's completely unresponsive. The other plugin that I have just started using is the Meow Gallery. I actually bought this a few months ago, almost straight after buying the Lightbox plugin, but I initially could not get it working. It turns out that there is a compatibility issue between this plugin and the Essential Grid plugin that I use to build some of the thumbnail grids that you'll see on the site, such as the ones you can see under the Portfolios menu. Despite all of the effort the Meow Apps developer puts into explaining how busy he is, like he's the only person in the world that's busy, and also why you have to only contact him when you're really stuck, he was actually pretty good at helping me find a solution for this when I contacted him. It seems that he lives just down the road from me here in Tokyo, so we had a nice conversation over email about that. The Essential Grid support team sat on the issue for 10 days before I finally got them to acknowledge the compatibility issue, and they're now attempting to put a wrapper around the option that causes it. But at the time of writing, if you simply install both of these plugins on a WordPress website, Meow Gallery is dead in the water. The developer is also ignoring my request to add a compatibility mode checkbox to the settings, so at this point, I'm having to manually edit the plugin code to make these two plugins play nicely together. Hopefully, I'll get some kind of resolution on this soon. Let me back up a few steps though and explain something that led me to want to implement the Meow Gallery in the first place. And that is that the next-gen gallery from Imagely uses a proprietary gallery format. So if you stop using next-gen, you basically lose all of your galleries. Because of this, I had held back a little with regards to putting galleries in posts, as I didn't want to end up having to go back and edit hundreds of posts when I moved away from NextGen. The promise of the Meow Gallery was that it worked with the standard WordPress galleries. Because of the compatibility issues I'm having, I actually have to convert my WordPress galleries to Meow Galleries to get this to work, but they are essentially the same thing. I can literally flick between them with a single click, which is a huge step forward. The other reason that I really wanted to get the Meow Gallery plugin working though was because it has some of the most beautiful thumbnail layouts that I've seen. Here, for example, is a small gallery of images using the tile layout. You can also click on these to see the shooting information, etc. in the Meow Lightbox that I mentioned earlier. Notice how the tiles are resized so that they all display in their native orientation and form a perfect rectangle rather than having a gap after the last image. This is a simple concept, but there are not that many plugins that achieve this so well. It literally took just a few seconds to select these images and make a gallery. If the images need to be uploaded, you do that with the regular WordPress media library rather than a proprietary interface, which again really helps to future-proof the work that you put into building a website or online portfolio. I'm not going to go through all of the gallery styles, but here also is a small gallery of images using the square thumbnails option. This is another favorite of mine. And as you can see, it's not a problem to have multiple galleries on the same page with different styles. To see some larger galleries, I've replaced all of my next-gen portfolio galleries with Meow Gallery using the Meow Lightbox to display the images, so you can view any or all of them from the Portfolios menu or the grid on the Portfolios page, both linked from the top of the website at martinbaileyphotography.com. As I mentioned earlier, I'm also using Essential Grid to create and present some of my thumbnails, such as those that you'll find under the Tours and Portfolios menus, and also on that Portfolios page. Essential Grid is created by an incredibly talented team who would be much better if their support was more responsive. although they are very professional and easy to work with once you get their attention. They also make Slider Revolution, which is the plugin I'm using to make some of the detailed sliders that you can see around the site, and everything that you see currently on the top page at martinbaileyphotography.com. Getting back to Essential Grid though, although each grid has to be created in their plugin interface, the images are taken from either the media library or the featured images that you've set on posts or pages. So it's, again, future-proofing your work. Even if you move to a different plugin for this purpose, you don't lose the images that you already have in your posts or in the media library. Okay, so that covers the three main elements that form what you now see on the site in terms of image display, gallery thumbnails, and thumbnail grids. Let's talk briefly before we finish about why I've moved away from the incredibly popular next-gen gallery from Imagely. I had actually, even from the word go, always had problems with next-gen gallery. When I created my video to introduce you to next-gen 2 years ago, I had actually already tried and failed to get next-gen working a number of times, and even in that video it was causing problems, which I proceeded to show you anyway, in my usual warts and all style. Well, although it got a little bit better with regards to errors in the admin console, etc., I actually continued to have problems with Next-Gen Gallery for the entire 2 years that I used it. There are also a number of fundamental flaws with Next-Gen that I reached out to the team about and was even told that some were fixed, but these things never worked on my system, despite multiple pleas for help. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but one thing was that Next-Gen stripped the EXIF data from images that you upload. So whenever someone copies an image from my portfolio gallery, there was no EXIF data in the image to lead them back to me. Even the images that could be bought and used as stock photographs were missing the EXIF data, and that prevents clients from identifying who they bought the image from. This is a major flaw in the Next-Gen Gallery, and although claimed to be fixed, it never worked for me. Even after I uploaded images from scratch again, rebuilding entire galleries. And of course, I checked that the EXIF data was in the originals, but it was stripped from my portfolio images. The last straw came a few weeks ago, when my WooCommerce payment gateways all stopped working. I lost half a night's sleep, having stayed up until 3:30 a.m. trying to fix it, and then lost the next morning until I found that deactivating the Next-Gen Gallery and their Pro plugin brought my WooCommerce payments back to life. I imagine the problem was caused by the relatively new Stripe gateway that had been added to Next-Gen, even though I had not activated it. I eventually would deactivate every plugin on a test staging site except for WooCommerce and Next-Gen, and the problem still occurred. It may have also been related to a setting on my site, but there was not enough time to keep looking. My only option was to keep Next-Gen deactivated. I emailed their support team and told them that they had 1 day to help, but they chose to throw the issue back into my court with a pointless question that I'd already answered. At that point, I realized that I had to figure out what the problem was with the Meow Gallery, because that was what I wanted to implement anyway, and that took an extra couple of days to figure out with the help of the Meow Apps developer. In the meantime, I deleted all of my Next-Gen galleries and recreated them with WordPress galleries, which don't look great, but it was better than seeing a broken shortcode on each of my portfolio pages in the absence of the Next-Gen plugins. Then a few days later, when we fixed the compatibility issue between Meow Gallery and Essential Grid, I edited each of my portfolios and flicked the switch to make the WordPress galleries display as Meow galleries, and my portfolios started looking beautiful again. I won't miss the e-commerce features of NextGen either, because it was really weak and did not interface with the full payment system provided by WooCommerce, and I have now created a whole sister site, Martin Bailey Art, to sell fine art prints and wall art from, so I'm covered on that front as well. I am actually really pleased that this happened, because I needed a push to finally move away from NextGen, but I am so happy that I've done so. I have learned now that it can be very limiting to use a plugin that creates a completely proprietary gallery, as NextGen does, and I'm going to try really hard moving forward to avoid getting into that situation again. So, if you're looking for some plugins to create some great looking WordPress galleries and include shooting information in your lightbox, I can recommend the Meow Apps and Essential Grid, and based on my own experience, I no longer recommend NextGen Gallery. They're a good team most of the time and good people, but I personally have had my fill of NextGen related problems and felt it was time to move on. Whatever you decide, I hope you found this useful. Thanks very much for listening today. If you enjoy this podcast, please share a link with your friends. Subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast program to ensure uninterrupted delivery. If you have a moment to rate the podcast or leave us a review in iTunes, that helps to keep us relevant in the huge number of podcasts out there now. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn, and links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back next week with another episode, but in the meantime you take care and have a great week whatever you're doing. Bye bye.